just been informed that the lawsuit in Dakota County that was assigned to me was dismissed. Is that correct, Mr. Hatch?
Yes, yes.
Okay. But just to clarify things, Justice Blacks was appointed by me. There's certain limitations on authority. We've been talking before the appointment to try to figure out what her role would be. And after her appointment, we're in close touch all the time. She does not have authority to hear the issues raised in the petition before her. So, I don't know what else to say. The petition came back to me. I don't know if I should hear it or dismiss it. It's not properly presented to her.
Your Honor?
I'm not sure exactly procedurally what to do. Because there was a petition brought, and it's still brought before her. I don't know, do you guys want to talk and see if there's agreement procedurally what we should do?
Your Honor, my understanding from Judge Glass is that you referred it down here. Do you want this today? Right? That's what
I wanted it as part of the lawsuit in Dakota County. I felt it was the same issues as in the lawsuit of Dakota County.
Well, it is the same issue,
It is.
but I thought it more appropriate to file the petition here pursuant to this. I thought that was the purpose.
Oh, all right. Because her authority is to determine and to make recommendations, not even to determine, to make recommendations to me as to whether or not a particular program or job is involved a critical core function of government. That's all her, that's really kind of the limits of her authority. And other issues that Chief Justice in the Supreme Court has assigned to me, this looks like another issue. And I don't want to jump through the formality of having to go back and reopen that lawsuit and then bring it back here. We don't have the time. So unless it's, well, I guess I'll listen to any objections to my hearing these issues. These issues seem to be of the nature of the horse racing issues. Probably the longer issue, and I'm not sure where that is. So with that, let me hear from the other parties about how they think I should proceed. My proposal is that I hear this as, I suppose, further clarification under the rulings, well, under my authority from the Supreme Court to hear shutdown cases. With that, we should note the appearances first. Mr. Hatch,
Yes.
Michael Hatch, on
My
behalf
name is
of?
Mike Hatch. I represent the Minnesota Zoological Garden.
Okay, and the gentleman with you?
Lee Umke, who is the executive director of the Minnesota Zoological Garden. I should note that the board of the Minnesota Zoological Garden is here as well, and I don't know whether I know if their individual parents is here or not.
May I have the director's, have him spell his last name, please?
E-H-M-K-E.
Thank you. And Mr. Gilbert next.
Yes, Alan Gilbert with the Attorney General's office, representing the petitioner in the interim funding for the executive branch of government.
Right. And Mr. Lillehaug.
David Lillehaug, Frederickson and Byron, special counsel to the governor, and at the appropriate time would want to make a motion for leave to intervene for the limited purpose of opposing the motion.
Why don't we talk procedure? Why? You can't speak unless we decide the motion to intervene. This morning, I granted it based on my past ruling involving the unallotment case where I did let Governor Pawlenty have his counsel be a party. That would seem to be consistent. It also would seem to be fair to Governor Pawlenty and fair to Governor Dean. Any objection, Mr. Hatch?
We have no objection.
Mr. Gilbert?
Your Honor, could I just clarify
Sure.
one thing, and maybe this gets to the process here. And I appreciate everything you've done, Your Honor. This has been an incredibly interesting matter, to say the least. And you've done a wonderful job in trying to direct the parties.
Well, I could use a lot less interesting than that. I could live in a lot less interesting times.
Your Honor, our reading of your order is that the issues of the kind that are being raised by the zoo are appropriately before the special master, and I can go over the reasons for that if you want. But what happened today is that the zoo was one of the petitioners. I think there's like 20 or 25 petitioners up there today. The zoo was one for 11 o'clock, and the special master said she had talked to you And at least my understanding was that you had a preference that this issue, because it was addressed in your order in some respect, be heard by you directly. And we assumed it was done in the context of Mr. Hatch petitioning the special master in pursuit of the order. So instead we thought, okay, now we'll transfer it down here to you, and you'll basically be the final decision maker, not just the special master on that. And the Attorney General's office, as you know, is taking positions as to every petition that is being heard up at the Judicial Center, and the Governor's office is also taking positions, sometimes different than the Attorney General. So that's why we're here in that capacity, and if that works for you, we prefer just to move along that way.
I think that's the way to do it, rather than delaying for it. Let's just hear the petition as one that would, a petition of this type, which basically is asking for an interpretation of the financing statutes.
Right.
Is not, I mean, I guess I may as well say it now, is not meant to be before the special master. The special master is meant to be hearing the issues as to what constitute core functions of government, not how those core functions are to be funded. My ruling is, if in fact they are a core function, and I keep using the term critical core function, because I think that the 11th Amendment limits core functions far more than in the past, where in 2005 even, because people will raise the issue and there's opposition, and that puts things in a more difficult stand. But that's what her, and in my discussions with her, you know, we've been doing this, you know, I think my last call, I think from her last night was about 11, I didn't, or 11:30, and I didn't get that call. I mean, I don't know, I might have been in bed. The night before, the last call was, I know from, because cell phones, 10:28 p.m. we talked about it. We've been trying to figure out and define her role, and trying to get it, set up the mechanics of it as best we can. So, there we have it. All right, I'm going to hear it anyhow. Let's just move on and get onto the motion, well, onto the merits of the petition you raised, Mr. Hatch. Why don't you proceed?
Your Honor, may I approach you? This is
Sure.
a notebook that I handed. I think I did one to your clerk.
You
It's
know,
a little bit changed from yesterday.
I call you Mr. Hatch, and sometimes I stumble because I know you were former Attorney General. I'm not sure what the protocol is. I mean, you can be called General Hatch, but you're here as a private practitioner, so I think it's appropriate to say Mr. Hatch. But
Yep, no, that's very, very appropriate.
wait, but I do respect your past services.
Well, good, somebody does. Your Honor, there's actually a phrase at the zoo. They say when elephants rumble, you know, only the ants get crushed.
That's
and that's
correct.
what's going on in our state right now. I'm not going to go through all the procedure why we're here, but I think I'm on sync with what I believe the court has indicated, that the issue today is a standing appropriation, not a core issue. And I took the liberty of copying Exhibit 3, which is the zoo statute, which is in the notebook. And it basically says all receipts and interest from the operation of zoo concessions, memberships, and donations must be deposited.
Slow down.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll do it slowly.
That's right.
All receipts and interest from the operation of zoo concessions, memberships, and donations must be deposited in a special account, in a special revenue fund, and are appropriated to the board. There's no limitation. It's a standing appropriation. If we go to Exhibit 4, which is, this is the education funding, very similar to the final finding in the court's order a week ago. This was deemed to be a standing appropriation. There is annually appropriated from the general fund to the department of an amount. It goes on. Exhibit 5, same thing with local aids. That was in the final finding of the court. That local aids, it says the sum sufficient to discharge the duties are appropriated. Exhibit 7, it was a previous issue that was being discussed by the court, where it's restricted. I think this is with regard to the horses. It says authorized in the biennial appropriation. raised by the court in a prior motion, I think it's very appropriate, and Mr. Apix, who is here, took the liberty of being very diligent in checking out with the state senate. The court had asked, well, is there an appropriation for this special account on each year? And we checked it out, and there's not. The fiscal agent for the state senate said there is no state appropriation for this because it is a standing appropriation. And with the liberty of the court, I'd like to get an affidavit if I can. I don't know if we can over the 4th of July weekend, but at least represent to the court in an open court here. I'm a lawyer licensed to practice law. That, and I think Mr. Apix is here as well.
Apix, can you spell that, please?
A-P-I-T-Z.
What is his role?
He is an attorney and as well volunteering or otherwise for the Minnesota Zoo Foundation. He's with the law firm of Messerly and Kramer.
Well, I mean, I know Mr. Apix.
Okay.
I didn't know if he left Messerly and Kramer and started working for the Senate. I didn't know.
Oh, but he obviously he knows the Senate. I think that he's up there quite a bit.
Well, I know he's a lobbyist.
Yes. So that, I think, based on those representations and clear definition, a clear statement of the account there, that it is a standing appropriation, and I believe it fits the confines of the judge's order, as you'll see in the petition that we filed. We did also file a proposed order. It's attached to Exhibit 6. I will note that I filed that as a proposed order yesterday. Somehow, I believe in the media, they picked it up as having got an order signed or something. I think this happened 3 times this week with different orders filed. So there was some communication out in the media, which did not come from the zoo. It didn't come from me, but was miscommunication as to the proposed order. I'm not going to ready to say no. We've got a petition there. It's a pretty clear statute. Yeah, we're not asking to be named a critical core function. We're simply asking for standing.
Is it your position, when I was trying to read the statutes actually a little bit last night, but my brain was kind of turning off. And is it your position that all the receipts that the zoo receives go into the special fund, and then every year, without any action of the legislature, they go out of that fund, that there's no discretion by the legislature as to whether all of it goes or not? All of it goes out to the zoo?
I've been told that that's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. With that, Mr. Gilbert.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. And we do agree with that position, Your Honor. We think it's clearly a standing appropriation. Nothing further is needed for it. What the issue is, Your Honor, it's not core critical court services, as Mr. Hatch indicated. It is not. It deals with the issue whether there is someone at MMB, Management and Budget, who has an appropriation. I call it to push the button to process the payment. Mr. Lillyhog doesn't like that phrase, but it's an administrative service that needs to be done to make sure that the payments are issued appropriately out of this standing appropriation. That's all that needs to be done. And Your Honor, in your order, if you remember, you actually dealt with the aid to local governments.
Yes.
And you said, and rightfully so, that there's a standing appropriation for LGA. And as a result, it should be paid. Well, LGA had the same issue as the zoo has here, Your Honor. Now, I want to be really clear, because Mr. Lillyhog was saying earlier that as to LGA, that there is an appropriation for the Department of Revenue to figure out how much payment is due each local community. But still, to issue the payments, MMB still has to process it. So it's the same issue, and I just want to kind of head off that issue that Mr. Lillyhog, I believe, might raise. So we're talking about the identical thing. And Your Honor, what you said in your order was that the discretionary funding in this state is up to the legislature, not the court, and rightfully so. It is up to the legislature, not the court. What the legislature has done is, based upon its discretion and legislative judgment, they have a continuous standing appropriation for the zoo. If the button is not pushed because some sort of funding is not provided by you pursuant to an order, that is going to be contrary to the legislative intent. And ironically, what we have here is an opportunity to actually effectuate an appropriation of the legislature when we don't have many appropriations whatsoever. So it's consistent with what you did with local aid. It's consistent with what the administration has done with Minsk. And I don't know if you recall, and this is press reports and things that I'm familiar with, but Minsky initially was not going to be funded as part of the shutdown because there was no one there at MMB to what I call push the button. But ultimately, the administration agreed, okay, we'll push the button. So they got funding. They are not a critical core service. You did not find local aid to government to be a critical core service. So it's a fairness issue as much as anything else, to treat the zoo equally in that regard. So we think that's appropriate. And by the way, Your Honor, based upon just the core critical functions that are listed in the governor's list, there's going to be 183 people at MMB. So they got plenty of people available to push the button over there for purposes of the zoo. So, Your Honor, we think that clearly, under the law of standing appropriation, we don't think that can be reasonably disputed, and we think consistent with your order, the zoo should be able to operate. Thank you.
Okay, again, I'm doing a little thinking out loud here. I'm just looking to see what his order. The order specifically directs the Commissioner of Management and Budget to expend funds as directed by the plan of the zoo. For the zoo concession and revenue account is specifically and perpetually appropriated by MinStat 85804.
Your Honor, and your the full
You know, because this morning you were, not you, but someone from your office came representing the Office of Management and Budget. It sounds like nobody's here for them now.
Well, again, this is not a lawsuit. This is a petition.
Okay.
So they haven't been sued. Mr. Lillyhog is representing the governor, and the Office of Management and Budget, of course, is adhering to the position of the governor. So you have someone defending that position. You know, let me mention one other thing, and if you look at page 9 of your order.
Do we have it up there?
Your Honor, Exhibit 2.
Exhibit 2.
No.
Oh, good.
Page 9. No.
If you look at page 9, you contemplated this very issue in that you set forth, attributing it to the governor's office, some standards for core critical functions. And if you look at the last one, it says necessary administration and supportive services, including but not limited to computer, system maintenance, internet security, and the important one, issuance of payments. Again, these are just examples. But it deals with necessary administration. So it contemplates where you don't have an appropriation for a core critical service, or you do have an appropriation for something that's not a core critical service. It is a core critical service to provide administration of those payments. That's what this literally says. And that's what the federal government has done. And this standard actually comes from the federal government, the OMB. So you provided for it in numerous ways. That's how the LGA was paid. That's how the school district funding was paid. That's how the Minsky was being paid. And we don't think the zoo should be treated any differently, seeing as how they have a standing appropriation.
And it looks like, well, I don't think, no, I've made clear that all of the other admirable things the zoo does are not core functions.
And they're not arguing that they are.
No, they aren't. The only ones I've listed are in 36.
But neither is local government aid.
No, I understand that. Let me finish speaking.
I'm sorry.
Speaking out loud. It also seems that your position is that I found these not as critical core functions, but as standing appropriate.
Just as an application of state law.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I understand it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lilhog.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm representing the governor today, and unfortunately what the dialogue that the court just engaged in indicates is there's a very serious problem here.
Yeah.
And the problem is that there was a lawsuit started in Dakota County by the zoo against the Office of Minnesota Management and Budget. The commissioner of that agency is Jim Showalter. As I understand it, 2 days ago in Dakota County District Court, the Attorney General's office appeared on behalf of the Office of Minnesota Management and Budget to defend that lawsuit. So I will tell Your Honor, it is more than a little surprising that I now hear the Solicitor General arguing that some kind of order should be directed to Mr. Showalter, directing him to disperse the money when there was a lawsuit just 2 days ago where they appeared for Mr. Showalter. Now, I understand that government attorneys are sometimes given a little more latitude, But this seems very, very odd to me, Your Honor.
Well, I'm having trouble with it too, I'll be honest. I mean, before you even were speaking, I'm still having trouble
I'd like to
understanding that.
respond anytime.
I will give you a chance,
Okay.
but we're gonna go in order. And I'm trying to figure out how they could be representing Showalter this morning and Showalter's out alone now. Go ahead, Mr. Lilhoff.
And in fact, Your Honor, the motion that was made to the Supreme Court that resulted in these cases coming to Your Honor was supported by the affidavit of Mr. Showalter to the effect that he was being sued all over the place, including in Dakota County. And that's why he wanted all the cases put before Your Honor, so at least they would be in one spot. Now, I'm only representing the governor here today, but I will make remarks on behalf of the governor as to his position vis-a-vis the zoo. But Mr. Showalter clearly is in an uncomfortable situation. Your Honor, contrary to the impression conveyed by counsel for the zoo does not operate in a vacuum from the rest of state government. As the petition to this court, or excuse me, the motion to intervene to this court in this proceeding says 29% of the zoo's money comes from the state treasury and the rest comes from receipts, admissions, concessions, and so on. So the funding for the zoo is a mixed grill. Some by way of this continuing appropriation with respect to the concessions and receipts and so on, and some from the state. And as I understand it, that is because the zoo is not a profit-making institution that is actually subsidized by the state of Minnesota. Then, when you consider who the zoo employees are, my understanding is that Minnesota Management and Budget is the fiscal agent for the zoo and also the fiscal administrator for the zoo.
Just a second, 35A.01. Subdivision 3 reads, the director, officers, and employees of, I think this means of the board, are included in the meaning of state employees under the provisions of section 352.01, subdivision 2A. That's another thing that's making me scratch my head.
Your Honor took the words out of my mouth. These are state employees, and so they get paychecks, and it goes through the state of Minnesota. So this is not a political subdivision. This is a part of the state. The Minnesota Zoological Garden is established as a unit of state government. And so Minnesota Management and Budget is deeply involved. Now, both in connection with the funds from the state treasury and in connection with the administration support provided by MMB, in the infinite wisdom of our legislature and some previous governor, this mixed grill was created. And that means for the zoo to operate, some of the money comes from this continuing appropriation from their own receipts, and some of it comes from money that has not been appropriated for this biennium. And let's remember, the support services provided by Commissioner Showalter and MMB would have been appropriated in the state government operations bill that Your Honor saw this morning, admitted into evidence in connection with the matters regarding the racetrack, and Your Honor saw the veto message from the governor. So the legislature and the governor have not agreed on that. So if the court were to issue an order to Commissioner Showalter, it would be directing Commissioner Showalter to spend unappropriated money, unappropriated and not enacted in an appropriations bill, to provide support services for the Minnesota Zoo. Now, the governor's not unsympathetic to the zoo in any respect. The question is, what does the law require? And is that kind of order sufficient to get around Article 11, which says you should not spend unappropriated money, as the court has interpreted it, unless there's a critical core function?
Was there anything for the zoo in that bill that they gave me this morning? Any mention of, was the zoo word in there anywhere?
I don't know, Your Honor. I didn't have a chance to search that. But it's approximately a 70-page bill, if I recall.
Yeah. The heading is pretty long.
What the zoo is proposing here, by way of what in Dakota County was characterized as a TRO and or a writ of mandamus, and now is characterized as a petition in the temporary funding proceeding, is that the court direct a new model of business operation for the zoo. which is that the zoo now will only spend the receipts and so on, and it will spend that until they run out without the state funding, but they're still going to need the state MMB administration. And then presumably by that time the government shutdown is going to be done, and then the zoo can resume its normal operation where it's subsidized more directly by the state of Minnesota. We don't think that's what Article 11 contemplates. We do not think that's what the statute contemplates. And Your Honor, we don't think that's what the court order contemplates. And I'm referring to your order of Thursday. In paragraph 36, Your Honor dealt with the Minnesota Zoo. And I point out that that was in response to a motion to intervene that specifically referenced the exact issue that the court is dealing with today. I have the motion of Minnesota Zoological Garden to intervene.
They might have withdrawn that. I think there was an argument that they withdrew that. And if they did, I think the reason I granted, you know, I haven't had, I mean, I've got the transcript back there somewhere. And I was going to check that. If Mr. Hatch, when he gets another chance to speak, says, yeah, we withdrew our motion to intervene, I'll change the order. Part of the reason I put them in as a party was to give them that right to emergency appeal, because I know how important it is for them. But if they don't want to have the right to appeal, I'll, you do, yeah, okay, all right, go ahead.
Well, here's what the court order said. Of course, in paragraph 36, the court determined that it was not a critical core function, and that even when the large part paid for by admission charges and other receipts, it is not, and where not was inserted by way of amendment, not a function of government sufficient to overcome Article 11. Then when you go to the order of the court, paragraph 9 says, the motion of the Minnesota Zoological Garden to intervene is granted, as their position is not adequately represented by existing parties. Now, if something happened where, I remember Mr. Hatch speaking, but if in some respect he withdrew the zoo's motion to intervene, this must now be the equivalent of a motion to re-intervene, I suppose. Whatever one calls it, it is a motion for relief specifically against Minnesota management and budget, and the proposed order here is very, very unusual. The proposed order says, paragraph 4, this order shall direct the Commissioner of Management and Budget to expend funds as directed by the 25th Zoo.
Got it?
Wow. So apparently the Commissioner of MMB, again, not sure what his position is in this proceeding, is going to be directed by some other agency of government. I think it's supposed to be the other way around. I think he's in charge of the finances. And the zoo is an agency of government with all the finances through Minnesota Management and Budget. So for all of these reasons, Your Honor, even if there's a continuing appropriation, there are many agencies of state government that do many good things. And as Your Honor pointed out in paragraph 36, nothing against the zoo at all, and Your Honor has made comments regarding the racetrack and the zoo, nothing against their employees, but fundamentally they're not a critical core function, and then to spend MMB unappropriated funds to support all that, cut the paychecks and so on and so forth, at a time when there are many, many agencies of government that are having to be laid off today and not supported by MMB, we think is inappropriate and would not follow the law. So thank you.
How do you distinguish Mr. Hatch's position that these funds are the same as local government aid funds, which my order does, in effect, and what it does say that a core function of Office of Management and Budget, what initials should I be giving it? MMB?
MMB.
MMB. That MMB needs to cut the check, push the button, whatever it is. According to my order, they do need to do that for local government aid because it is basically it's already been appropriated. His position is this has already been appropriated, and therefore it doesn't violate, it isn't inconsistent with anything else in my order, but I didn't address whether it was whether it was a standing appropriation like local government aid.
Two areas to distinguish that, Your Honor. First, I read your order against the context of the city's intervention papers, where they said local government aid was going to things like police and fire and so on, which certainly are core and critical government services. But second, there's a really critical distinction. And if the court will turn to the notebook of the zoo submitted at paragraph 5 that has the LGA provision,
Yes.
the LGA statute itself provides for its funds for its own administration. And by the way, it's not Minnesota Management and Budget that actually calculates the LGA, but it's the Department of Revenue that does so. And that subdivision 2 says the sum sufficient to discharge the duties imposed by these sections, that is laying out the various formulas, is annually appropriated from the general fund to the Commissioner of Revenue. So it's our view, and we're still reviewing the LGA part of Your Honor's order. We respect the decision and respect the reasoning behind it, but certainly LGA is different than the zoo. And by the way, this term, push the button, that's not accurate. These are real people in Minnesota Management and Budget that have to be there, and they have to be paid unappropriated funds.
I understand that. I mean, I don't, you know, I know what he means. I mean, we aren't saying push the button or somebody. I'm saying writing the check.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that is now electronic, but it still requires employees who are paid with, you're right, with unappropriated funds, unlegally appropriated funds.
And then when there are employees of government that stay on, there are a whole host of related costs
Oh, I know.
associated with that. Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm still absorbing what you said. Give me just a second. Okay. Mr. Hatch.
Your Honor, the Exhibit 5 that he points to talks about appropriation of commercial revenue. Commercial revenue is different than the MMD. That is not a money going to the revenue commissioner is not paid for back office at OMD. So that exhibit for local aids, that exhibit for aid to education is exactly the same as the exhibit for the zoo. Think of it, Mr. Lillehog seems to agree that it's a standing appropriation. At that point, I think the issue is over. It's a standing appropriation. The court order says a standing appropriation. That's how local aid is paid. That's how education is paid. They're paid. That's what it is. It complies to Article 11. Article 11 says it becomes no funds spent unless appropriated. This one's been appropriated by a standing appropriation. It's a done issue. Now, we go back and say the issue is, well, but there's somebody who's cutting the check, and gee, it's not there, therefore we can defeat the whole purpose of government. We can defeat critical functions. We can defeat standing appropriations. We can pick and choose. State colleges, we'll fund those today because we want to. It's not in Exhibit A, it's not in the court order, but we'll just fund them, and we'll have the back office do it. But zoos, which have a standing appropriation, we're not going to fund because we choose not to. As far as I know, the governor's not king. This is a standing appropriation. They're obligated to follow the law. I'm frankly a little offended that Mr. Lillehog gets up here and makes that kind of a claim. How can you pick and choose who the winners and losers are? OMB pays critical function, that's one thing, but the OMB pays for standing appropriations. They cannot pick and choose standing appropriations. It's already the law. He even agrees it's a standing appropriation. Now, the consequences of denying the petition is to say that a standing appropriation by law is not going to be followed. How do we get there? Upon what basis? What court decision? How do we pick and choose state colleges? How do we pick and choose local aid and education where we pick on the zoo? Why? Is it because of some political thing? Because people like the zoo? They go out there? Their grand opening is on Tuesday? Let's make people suffer? Let's have a hard shutdown? Is that now a constitutional concept? That's politics. That's what's going on with this whole issue. If we follow the statute, it's a continuing appropriation. If we follow the Constitution and the court order, they got to fund it. This isn't about politics. It's not about hard shutdowns. It's about following the law. Nobody, not even the governor, gets to pick and choose what the statutes are. Nobody, including the governor, gets to pick and choose what's funded. This is a state facility. No doubt about it. State employees. We don't deny it, but it is a standing appropriation. Very clear in all the, we have tried, all I look for is a forum, whether it be Dakota County here or the Judicial Center. We're not, I'm doing my best, Judge, to try try to figure out whether it's a petition, a motion, a lawsuit, or whatever. But the big thing is, we have a standing appropriation that even the governor agrees. All we're looking for is that the law be followed. Thank you.
Mr. Lillow, do you agree with the standing appropriation? Just a yes or no? I'm not sure I heard you that way exactly.
I didn't agree in those terms. In the operation of the zoo comes from three sources. One, from the money in 85.04A that is annually appropriated to the board for operations and maintenance. Number two, from the 29% that Mr. Hatch's brief indicates comes from the state treasury. And then number three, by all of the operations and management and budget and all of the state bureaucracy that supports all the employees that work at the zoo.
If there's a 29% annually from state government, there's got to be a bill that must have come before the legislature this year.
Your Honor, I believe there is for the 29%, but not the rest.
Okay. The
The rest of
29%, and the legislation did not appropriate the 29%.
Yes, and if I could throw out a name just so we have it on the record. Greg Knauf, I believe it's K-N-A-U-F, who is the, I was calling
Analyst.
the analyst, fiscal analyst at the state senate, is the source for our information.
All right, thank you. That does make it tougher, doesn't it? Okay. All right, Mr. Gilbert.
Your Honor, on that issue, what I understand the zoo is saying is that they have a standing appropriation, and that's clear under the law. And what they want to use is just the standing appropriation at this time. Is that correct? And if they run out of money, then they'll close down, like everybody else. But the point is, the legislature intended to have a continuous appropriation in the form of, these are admission fees to the zoo, right, that they have appropriated in a standing way. Your Honor, I just wanted to comment on this Dakota County proceeding. Although I wasn't present, Ms. Anderson was, who's in the courtroom today, and I know you're familiar with her. Our position at the Dakota County proceeding and our position at those horse racing cases that you're very familiar with because now you've heard them, is that we thought that it would be appropriate for the special master to consider the issue in question. And obviously you don't agree with that interpretation, and which is fine. But what we did with respect to all three of them is we suggested we should go to the special master. And we said that as well with respect to the zoo. That was told to the court that that's where it should go, and that was our position. And you know the rest of it today. They were scheduled at 11 o'clock today, and the special master took us aside a little bit before 11 and said she had talked to you, and the preference was to have it down here. So that's how that came out. And frankly, I explained all this to Mr. Lillyhog before the hearing, which he didn't communicate to you.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just mention one other thing, Your Honor? I have to, you know we've been very, very involved with the interpretation of Article 11, Section 1, and you've been even more involved with that. And we've done a lot of exhaustive research, and we have a lot of strong feelings about what it means in a situation like this. But I just have to say, when Mr. Lillyhog got up and he said that funding the zoo under these circumstances is not, and this is what he said, is not what Article 11, Section 1 contemplates. Well, then I would ask, and I'll ask this rhetorically, then why the heck did they fund Minsky? And why is LGA funded? Because they're identical. And to the extent that Mr. Lillyhog, and again, I explained this before, and I don't think it was very clear from him. As it relates to LGA, there is a standing appropriation for the Department of Revenue to calculate the amount of payment that each local municipality gets. That is true. But what is unclear from what he said is that identical to the zoo and identical to Minsky, someone at MMB still has to push the button. And that's what we're talking about. And as I said before, I submit to you on page 9 of your order, you provided that a critical core function was the necessary supportive administrative services, whether it be a critical core function or a standing appropriation. And frankly, that's how, in my view, you were able to fund LGA. Because providing for MMB a critical core service to actually issue payments under those circumstances where you have a standing appropriation is entirely consistent with your order. Thank you, Your Honor.
Any final words?
Nothing further, Your Honor, unless-
Mr. Hatch.
Sure, just one thing to correct, I just want to make sure everybody understands that we were in good faith. I was in good faith on this. We accepted on the original last Thursday's hearing that was a critical core function. That was the essence of the impetus for filing the TRO proceeding in these things. I did talk to Judge Abrams. We both made it clear to Judge Abrams in terms of contacting you. I think there was a contact made.
Judge Abrams called me.
Okay, yeah.
I told him, you do what you have to do. I said, "But this is going to make this even crazier."
And everybody.
That's all I said.
No, that's fine.
I mean, do what you have to do, but this is going to be even crazier. And I also, he did say to me something about part of the argument that was raised, and I said, sounds a lot like what I had.
And we did not respond with regard to the motion to consolidate. We did not. We got rid of that case. We filed a petition here. Be simple or look into the forum. We're not trying to get around and do a federal attack. I just want to make sure you understand that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty, well, I guess I'll take it under advisement. Guess what? It's 10-3. I don't think you're gonna have a zoo today. I know you aren't gonna have a zoo today. You know, you're gonna have to leave my clerk with your email messages, because I'll issue an order by email. And it may have to be tomorrow, I don't know if I can do it, because I've got horse races and stuff like that, so.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That's it. Thank
Thank you, Your Honor.
That concludes calendar for
We think there's a standing we think there's a standing appropriation, and I think people are in agreement on that. The issue is there a back office to basically give the support necessary for the zoo to operate with that standing appropriation, and that was the issue that we're talking about.
Okay, you could
Hi, good to see you.
restate your position. I was behind you. I was taping with Judge Gearin's permission, but I was getting the back of your head. So.
You know, Bill, I'm a huge fan of the uptake, but I'm not giving any interviews unless the governor's office tells me to. So please convey to Mike and all the viewers my very best regards.